Hello. Welcome back to the Prosperous Empath. Kat here. I'm joining you all today from Puerto Rico. My husband and I scheduled, last week, a super impromptu and well-deserved vacation and some time away to Puerto Rico for 10 days. And we're celebrating some big family wins, which I'm excited and looking forward to sharing with you a lot more about in some upcoming episodes. But for now, let's dive into today's topic because this is one of my favorite blog posts and now podcasts that I get to share every year. And I've been doing so for well over the past, 5+ years. And it's the episode in which I share about my word of the year. And spoiler alert, I don't actually have my word of the year chosen yet for 2024, which was the inspiration for today's episode, because having a word of the year has consistently served as an empowering practice for grounding me and calling in a new experience or a way of being that I want to cultivate in the new year. And I know you've heard me share about my own relationship with New Year's resolutions, and I find that they're so often clouded in changing something about ourselves that we don't like or we want to fix, and something that's typically focused on a doing, whether it's wanting to lose a couple pounds or change a bad habit. And wanting to change a bad habit is typically not an empowering place to come from as a coach. A word of the year, on the other hand, it focuses on being. And for so many of us, we've mastered doing, and it is time to start being. So if you've already selected your word of the year, then listen on, and I would love to hear over on Instagram, or if you want to hit reply and email me, I'd love to hear your word of the year and your journey to land on it. But what do you do if you haven't yet selected a word of the year for you? Now, this has never been the case for me before. I've never been this far along in the calendar year. We're recording today's intro close to the end of the month of January. And I in the last couple days, I have finally landed on my word, and I'm excited to release a whole nother upcoming episode about it. But for now, I actually invited a couple members of my mastermind community on to today's episode to share about their own experiences in choosing a word of the year, the journey that it took them to land on their word of the year, what it means to them, how they intend to practice applying their word of the year throughout the year, and their relationship in the past with what a word of the year has meant for them. It's a really fun episode. My two guests are one from each of my masterminds, and they don't really know each other. So it was kind of a deep dive conversation with some women who share a lot of values and identify as heart-centered entrepreneurs. And we had a really deep and thought-provoking conversation around this process of choosing a word of the year. So whether you've already chosen your word of the year and you're looking for some tips or resources or a framework for applying your word of the year to your work in 2024, or whether you were like me at the time of this recording and you were perhaps a little frustrated or impatient to land on your own word, I feel you. and tune in. You might find some insight or some resources that will support you in your own journey of noodling and really intuiting your word of the year. So a little bit about our guests on the show today. I'm thrilled to have Rebecca Arnold join me. Rebecca is a certified coach and the founder of Root Coaching and Consulting, a leadership coaching firm. Her clients are mission-driven leaders seeking holistic success in the fields of higher education, medicine, law, K-12 education, and social impact organizations. She's a lawyer by training. She's been called a straight-talking, big-hearted coach, and her coaching has been referred to as a physical exfoliation. Rebecca's book, The Rooted Renegade, Transform Within, Disrupt the Status Quo, and Unleash Your Legacy will be released in June 2024. I have been looking forward to reading Rebecca's book for, well over the past year and a half. So I'm thrilled to be sharing more about her book and having her on the show again later this year to talk more about the wisdom within. And then I'm also thrilled to have Rebecca Eller join us on the show today. Rebecca began her teaching journey in Japan. Since then, she's immersed herself in the educational community, taking on roles in ESL, digital literacy, and curriculum creation. As a LinkedIn top voice, Rebecca merges her passion for learning with an avid curiosity in AI, VR, and AR. It is such an honor to have two guests with a background in education join me in today's episode because I find that educators just think about topics like this very differently. They bring different questions. They have different understandings of the framework and the application of the work in personal development. So it's just a really delicious conversation. And it's also just a window into how we collaborate and support one another in our Emerge and Unbounded Mastermind communities. Something I really appreciate being a coach among a community of like-minded, art-centered entrepreneurs is that I've found some of my own growth work is to sit in the question with my colleagues, to be in the unknowing and allow the unfolding of my own wisdom and my own intuitive voice to emerge, and to really model that side of my own humanity as a coach and a mastermind leader. So I'm thrilled to do this with two women that I deeply appreciate and respect who they are and their bodies of work in the world. If you're interested in getting to know our community more and having a deeper felt sense of our own mastermind community, I strongly invite you to join us for our non-networking power hour. It is our monthly invitation to come and have a taste of our work in the world and get supported by a community of super big-hearted entrepreneurs. Our next Power Hour falls on Monday, February 12th at 12 noon Eastern Time. As always, you can find the link in the show notes. And with that, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Hello, ladies. I'm so excited to have you both on the podcast today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Me too.
Well, I was sharing a little bit before we shifted gears that I always find it a little awkward having a conversation with more than one person because there's like those like, okay, who has the mic now? Who's going to talk now? So hopefully we can get through that real quick. And today we're going to talk all about our relationships with our word of the year, which I know the two of you have landed on for yourselves, and I haven't yet. But before we do, I would love to give you each an opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about kind of who you are in the world, what you do, because I love that we're each bringing different perspectives to this conversation.
So I'm Rebecca Arnold. I'm a holistic leadership coach, and I support folks who are mission-driven leaders who are seeking holistic success in lots of ways. So they're often in the fields of medicine, law, higher education, K-12 education. And people have referred to me as a straight-talking, big-hearted coach, which I love. And someone once called my coaching psychical exfoliation, which I think is the best compliment I've ever gotten.
Please repeat that. What was that?
Psychical exfoliation, like exfoliating your psyche. Yeah.
I love that.
That is who you are. I think we're done here.
I'm Rebecca Eller-Molitas. I'm an adult education consultant. I work with people who are either administrators or educators, teaching and leading adults, usually in areas like English language learning, digital literacy, high school equivalency, or workforce development.
I love that you both have kind of this background in education that you're bringing to the conversation. And I hail from the world of economics. So these are like some very different backgrounds and fields. And when I think of word of the year, it's like totally different, right? Like it's not based in theory. It's not based in data. I'm curious, like what does it mean to you? Like what does having a word of the year mean to you? You're each Rebecca, so I'm not going to call on you, but feel free to just respond when you feel inspired.
For me, this is my first word of the year, and I am trying it out because I need some sort of touchstone to look back to, and it can't be something long and complex because that's just not how my days run. So I'm going to try a word that I want to touch back to when I'm making decisions or trying to figure out which branch of the path I need to take.
That's cool. Like I hear kind of a touchstone to support your decision-making process.
Absolutely. That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of a perspective I want to bring to the year or a lens. And I'm like super fascinated by neuroscience. So we have this whole like infrastructure in our brains that help us filter in and filter out, like filter in what's relevant and filter out what's less relevant. So to me, I feel like a word of the year helps me filter in more of what I want and less of what I don't, because I'm always looking for that thing then. So it's helped me kind of, as Rebecca Eller said, like prioritize, but also what kind of experience do I want to have? I talk to other people about my words so they remind me of it, which is very helpful. So I feel like there are lots of ways it shows up for me once I've identified it.
I can't remember when I started choosing words of the year. It's at least been the past 5 years, but I feel like I've been doing it longer if I kind of dug back. But as an ontological coach who coaches being, for me, a word of the year has always supported me in claiming who I'm becoming, like claiming that way of being that I want to call more into my life, my experience of living, my experience of my time, my energy, my relationships, my work. It's kind of like always for me encapsulated my work and my own commitment to practice what I coach.
I love that because it's almost like we have this buffet all the time of how we want to be and show up and all of that. And it's sort of like picking the entree that you're most interested in for that year.
I completely agree with that. That's why I needed one word. I feel like I have goals, but there are too many things on that list for me to have them at the top of my mind all the time. So I was like, oh yeah, an entree word, as you said, that would be nice.
Rebecca Eller, you were the first one to share with me a couple weeks ago this idea that you don't like doing goal planning at the beginning of the calendar year, that you kind of follow a different calendar. And I have been reading so much more about that ever since hearing you share about it first. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about like, when do you do goal planning and why do you do it on a different calendar? Because I feel like that people are really wanting to hear more of that, like more of that permission to do things differently, to do it on their own terms.
It sort of depends for me on what type of goal it is. This year, I have tried to combine my professional and personal goals all into one big goal tracking, keeping up with sort of system, I guess. Might be too formal of a word for what I've got going on over here, but because I work in academia, my life sort of rolls on an academic year or like a fiscal year. And New Year for me very much feels like July. I also have very severe seasonal affective disorder, and I live in Chicago. So I can't be trusted to think clearly about what is the best in things in life in December and January. And I know that about myself, so I do not even try to muddy my brain's waters with goal setting at that time. But one thing that has worked really well for me is that I typically start personal goals at the time that I feel like they're needed. I don't confine them to any particular schedule because I know we have lots of research on this in education. If you make somebody wait too long to access the thing they've built up the courage to do, often they don't start. So I let myself start when I need to. If I decided to exercise in October and waited till January, nothing would happen.
I love that. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons New Year's resolutions is such a setup for a faceplant for so many people, is because we put so much pressure on ourselves when we wait till that start of the year. And I totally resonate with that. Whenever I commit to a new habit, I always do it in the moment. There's seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. And sometimes I get really annoyed because oftentimes my habits are like in service of something, whether it's a holiday or an anniversary. And then I start in complete out of alignment with that date. So then I don't even get to celebrate the completion in alignment with whatever reason I started it for.
I like the September cycle of starting goals. Like you said academic year before, Rebecca, and to me, the new year starts in September for goals. And it's like the freshness. Like I loved school supplies when I was a kid. Like getting a new planner or school supplies was like my favorite thing in the whole year. So I do feel like there's a newness that still for me comes along in September that in January doesn't feel like there's this collective sort of energy around it, but it feels like there's a forcing to it that just feels really unnatural, especially in this, like I live in New England and it doesn't feel like that's a time of creation and generation. It feels like a time of resting and taking care of yourself and going slower and all that.
And nothing about January feels fresh to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's so interesting how we how when we create space, we can tune into reinventing our own goal setting and planning processes that work for our nervous systems, our personalities, perhaps where we live in the world. Like I've always defaulted to January as my time of year when I set my new goals. I think simply because that's what I've always done and seen. And now hearing you both is making me wonder, like, I wonder what my own cyclical calendar is. Well, let's shift to talking about words of the year because Rebecca Arnold, I know you've been doing them for years. I know Rebecca Eller, this is your first year. I've been doing them for years as well. Rebecca, how have they gone for you in the past?
They go really well for January and February. And then I sometimes forget them and need other people to remind me. But there are a few things I do that I have a personal dynamic where sometimes I rebel against my own structures. So I set up some things to protect myself against that. One of which is giving myself permission. As excited as I am in January about a new word, I do give myself permission to release it and decide on a different one if at any point it no longer fits. And that helps me to hold it much looser. And I haven't yet given up my word, but knowing that I could just feels like it's a little looser and more free. as Rebecca said earlier, it's really like a touch point throughout the year. And my husband always knows my word. My family knows my word. And so they'll point out to me sometimes if there's a moment where I'm living into that, which I really appreciate, because having that external kind of accountability and support around it helps me to remember kind of what I committed to and what I want for myself.
Hearing you say that makes me wonder, do they always point to your word when you are living into it? Do they also point to it when you're not?
They haven't yet, but I would not put that above them.
I feel like
it's asked in a sarcastic so probably.
I feel like there's always the blessing and the curse of inviting our family members to holding us accountable, right? It's like great when they're supporting us and calling us in, but like I know for me, my husband, like he's my accountability structure as well, and sometimes like it's just really irksome. But I will say today's day, I think today's 78 of going swimming every day in the water. And when I was in Chicago, and Rebecca Eller, I feel like I finally understand seasonal affect disorder after being with you in Chicago for 10 days. There was only one day I didn't want to go in the water, and I was gonna just take a cold shower. And he's like, "No, honey, you have to go. You said you would. You'll feel bad if you don't." And I was like, "Damn, you're so right. Okay, let's go." And I was so grateful because I really needed that reminder in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going in Lake Michigan?
I did. I went in Lake Michigan every day.
Wow. I'm so impressed by that.
Lake Bluff. And you know what? There were lots of other plungers there. They didn't stay in as long as I did, but it was fun. It was like a whole community. Well, I'd love to hear a little more like, Rebecca, what have some of your words been in the past? And what do you notice like the outcome of them has been, if you've noticed any shifts?
So last year, my word was delight, which I noticed how often I used it once I identified it. Like I would start to point out, like, I am delighting in this experience. And it was a really nice, almost like a pause in whatever I was going through to kind of acknowledge what the moment was. And I feel like I would start to kind of set up more moments where I was like, am I going to enjoy this or not? And like, is this something I want to lean more into or opt out of? My momentum of that definitely waned throughout the year. I felt like I was better at that at the beginning. So I'd like to this year have more intention around it, maybe have some kind of a structure where I plan an activity, maybe an activity a month or something like that, that is like really fully leaned into what my word is.
Well, I feel like that speaks to, a couple things. Like I hear, first of all, just the reminder that we often need structures to support our intentions, whatever those look like. And something you said earlier, and you just repeated it, but it's like the idea that sometimes we just need to own what we want and then allow ourselves to forget about it, to really like to not be so attached to creating that experience, so we can allow the magic, the wonder, the possibility of that experience to come to life. You know, like I have this little it's called like a wishing, it's called a wishing, I don't even know what it's called anymore, but it's like it's a Native American ritual where you put a wish in your little jar and then you hold it close. And I've had this for several years, and you just kind of claim what you want and then you forget about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes like really powerfully claiming what you want and then allowing the how to unfold allows you to fulfill in your own experience sometimes in a more beautiful, possibility-filled way.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, Kat, of, I know you've done an activity in the mastermind of like claiming your desire, writing down your desires. And I know you tell a story about looking back at a list you haven't looked at in a long time and seeing how many have come to fruition. And I feel like there's a similar way. Like I have a similar experience with vision boards. Sometimes I'll make them and then I forget where they are. And then I look at them 6 months later, 9 months later. I'm like, damn, girl, like you did a lot on here. And it's almost like your cells take it in or something, or your subconscious or something. I don't really know what the mechanism is, but it feels magical.
It does. Wait, Rebecca Eller, I would love to tap you here as the academia voice. Any thoughts on why that works?
No, nothing brilliant that I can share right now. But I do want to third, that if it's a physical thing, that works for me too. Last year, I got a witch's voodoo money ball, and I kept it on my desk all year. And I was very clear about the fact that I'm calling in money. I love you, money. Come on, hang out with me. And it worked. And I just kept this little guy sitting on my desk. But for me, I think the biggest thing was buying it and admitting, here, I'm carrying this thing through the street. This is what I want.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you say that. I don't know why it works. Like, I don't necessarily have the neuroscience or the theory or the data study behind it, but I have seen it work so many times for myself, and specifically for participants in the mastermind. It's like having that willingness to claim what you want and then allowing those desires to be witnessed powerfully. I feel like it shifts your relationship to what you want from an idea into a having and into kind of a believing of yourself, deserving, worthy, capable of having it.
Maybe there's something about clarity there. Like we talked about last week, if you're not able to do something or your process is breaking down somewhere, do you really have clarity on the vision of what you want? And I think that having an object like that, or for me, an object, I don't know if the word is going to work, really let me focus.
Yeah. Yeah, I think clarity is probably a key component of it. And I also think that so many of us have a very convoluted relationship with clarity because we so often think we need to have clarity before we commit to something, before we start, when typically clarity is something we generate for ourselves in motion. Well, I just wanted to share because right before we hit record, I was like hooping and hollering with you all because I finally remembered what my word of the year was for last year. And I erroneously thought it was prosperity, which it wasn't. It was prosperity was the word of the year from the year past, from 2022. But this year, last year's word, 2023, was leisure. And I have had the most epic breakthroughs in leisure last year. And I feel like I'm still kind of, delighting in them. Like I have this entirely different experience of my time, especially on the weekends. I no longer feel this urge, this need, like literally zero desire to work on the weekends. I feel so delighted in my experience of being in my home with my dogs, doing my dunk, going for my runs, listening to my audiobook. I got a portable sauna from my hubby for Christmas, which is behind me, like sitting in that after my dips, cooking in the morning. Like yesterday morning, I cooked an Indian dal dish that I'm trying to learn more Indian dal dishes to reach my husband's heart because I know it's through the kitchen. And I'm really trying there. I've got some work to do, but there is a complete different experience of it. Like I feel so much more leisurely in how I relate to my time, and also in the permission I give myself to be unplugged or disconnected from when I'm not working. Now when I reach 5 o'clock, like as soon as we finish recording this episode, like I will close the laptop, I'll put it away, and I won't even think about work until tomorrow. Like I will totally be present with my family. And that feels like something I've been longing for a really long time, but I hadn't created that, I don't know, I think that spaciousness to allow myself that full experience of living leisurely. It's wild. It's absolutely wild to me. I can't tell you how many kind of times I've been like really like caught off guard by how much I'm enjoying living in the moment.
I'm just really struck by your definition of leisure. Like your version of leisure feels so imbued with intention in a way that is very cat-like.
I don't even know what I said. What's my definition of leisure?
There's so much sort of purposefulness, even though it's time not with any particular agenda, it feels imbued with your essence and values. Mm-hmm. It's like there's family in there, there's health, there's time, like quality time with people you love. That is a piece, it sounds like, of how you experience leisure, which I don't know that that's how everybody would necessarily define it. So it's just cool from over here, hearing how you've made it, you've embodied it in a way that is fully you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also loved your expression and your excitement around delight, which is Rebecca's word. And I thought that was really interesting that delight was a part of that leisure for you.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I appreciate, Rebecca Eller, you pointing to like the physical expressions of it, because I feel like that's often a sign that we've landed on our word of the year, like when we come to life, when we're lit up by it. And I've heard both of you share your words of the year for 2023, and I know you're both lit up by them. I'm looking forward to creating that experience for myself too. But I would love to hear. I'd love for you to share with my audience, like, what are your words for the year? What was your process to land on them?
So mine is scrumptious.
Yes.
Which is a little weird, which I totally own because, I'm a little zany. And what I so love about scrumptious is that I'm a foodie. So like, obviously there's the foodie element of it, but when I eat something delicious, it is a full body experience. It is like my mouth, their tastes are exploding in my mouth. My body is like a full body. And that is kind of the energy that I want to bring to this year, to the different experiences I have. So if it's a connection with someone or a conversation, I want to feel like, give me another. And it just feels really alive for me. And I remember my husband and I were driving and I was like, I don't have a word for the year yet, blah, blah, blah. And we were just like driving along the ocean, and it just kind of hit me in a flash. And it was such a no-brainer. I was like, of course. Yes, of course it's scrumptious. And then for the rest of the weekend, he was like, is this scrumptious enough for you? Everything we experienced together. But it is like you're saying, Kat, it is like, I feel like it's a know it when you got it kind of feeling about it. And I feel like it is kind of like the next level of delight for me, which I also appreciate. I feel like this year is built on last.
The moment you said it, I just had the most fun little visions of what it might look like when your family is calling you in or calling you out on whether or not something is scrumptious. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
And hearing the embodiment of scrumptious for you, like that, like that just totally delights my whole nervous system. Like I totally feel that for you. And I also appreciate kind of how who we're becoming makes space, makes room for the next iteration of us, like how delight makes scrumptious possible. And I totally think for me, prosperity made leisure possible. Mm. Rebecca Eller, how about you? What's your word?
My word is not as glamorous as scrumptious, which is fabulous. My word is enough. And even though I didn't have a word last year, I had a witch's money ball instead. Money probably did make it possible and also necessary for me to start trying to figure out where the lines of enough are. I paid off some massive, massive student loans in 2023. And that sort of lets me feel like I have permission to change some things about how I operate in the world. I was recently reading this book called The Pathless Path by Paul Millard. And in it, he says that if we don't define enough for ourselves, we default to more. And that seemed really true to me in how I exist and also a lot of cultural things in the United States. And I thought, yeah, I really need to figure that out. And he goes on later to quote Paul Jarvis, who wrote this book called Company of One. Kat knows that, I think. And in that, they define enough as the upper bound of what's required. And I thought that was a really interesting definition that I can't decide if I totally stick with yet, but I liked that it wasn't like scraping by, making do sort of definition. So I get to toy around with that a little bit, but I have real swings of all or nothing in my life, especially in things like health. Like I have to do HIIT workouts or I won't work out at all. And I hate those. I like going for walks and doing gentle yoga where I roll around on the floor in my sweatpants. So I want to think a little bit about like really what is enough on the positive side and the negative side. Am I getting enough exercise or movement in my life? And lots of other categories in my life need that word to be applied to them as well.
I mean, I think for so many of us who identify as ambitious, we live like our default orientation is to live inside of that all or nothing mentality. So redefining that metric for ourselves based on kind of that what's enough measure is, I hear, so empowering. It certainly was for me, and I love that for you.
I'm excited. And I had no thought process to land on that. It just sort of struck me like a bolt of lightning in one of our mastermind sessions. There was zero thought behind that. I was like, oh, that's my word.
Yes, bolt of lightning. I have been waiting for that bolt of lightning. That's been my experience in the past. Like, what the heck? Yes, to that. Well, before, like, how do you envision yourself practicing, especially Rebecca Eller, like having never had one before? How do you envision kind of trying that on for size over the next year?
I think I need some ways to remind myself of what it is. I really like this company that makes temporary tattoos called Inkbox, and they will customize one for you. And I was like, maybe I'll get it like written on my wrist or something, and I'll have different designs and just try it out. I have a friend who does a piece of jewelry for her word of the year every year and really likes that. But while I was talking with you two about a touchstone, I thought, maybe I just need like the word of the year equivalent of a pet rock. I'm not sure. The first thing I've applied it to, though, is movement. So I settled on a very reasonable and not particularly ambitious number of steps that I wanted to average over a week, over a month, over a year. And I've been hitting that so far. The next little insight came when I was doing my laundry and looking at my closet and realizing I have way more than enough in there, and it would benefit me to really scale that down and maybe even have some kind of uniform so that I can reduce the cognitive load of dealing with all that mess.
Do you feel like your decision of like, is something enough a cognitive process, an embodied process, or both?
Because of how I operate, I think I will probably try to make it a cognitive process at the very least, and then we'll see if my body will probably have something to say about it as well, and I will resist it and then eventually come to terms with it.
That makes me think of a framework that someone introduced to me recently. We were on a coffee date and she calls it the Ayuk framework. The idea that we have to become aware of a new habit, a new way of being that we want to call in. And then we have to understand the impact, the possibility, the significance of it in our lives until it becomes an embodied knowing. And I feel like that really speaks to kind of the journey of becoming our words of the year, like the idea of calling it in and then understanding its kind of its reach, its possibility, the difference it makes to like truly embodying it in the fabric of our life, our lifestyle, and how we show up.
It's interesting. I feel like I need to embody it first, and then I feel like I can understand it better. It's like the has to come before I know what that feels like, before I can sort of understand, like, what are the pieces of that? What does that look like? What's possible? All of that. That's interesting.
I am so looking forward to seeing you embodying it on mastermind calls this year. Rebecca, let's go.
If you end up in Chicago, I think that I need to take you to eat the glitter cake that Kat and I ate when she was here, because I would say it is scrumptious and should definitely be part of this experience.
Well, I'm likely getting to Chicago this year, so I will let you know.
Yes, because Rebecca Arnold has a book coming. So maybe Chicago's on the book tour list. Is that happening? I'm looking forward to that episode when you come and we talk about your book. But maybe before we get there, and as we wrap for today, like I want y'all's support in helping me land on my words of the year. Like Rebecca Arnold, you're a coach, so I know this is totally in your wheelhouse. But Rebecca Eller, I feel like academia is becoming more and more of a coaching modality. So I know you have your coach toolkit in there. How would you invite me to consider my word for 2024?
So I have a couple thoughts. One is to make a vision board for yourself if you haven't done that already, and kind of look at the gestalt of that and see if there's a theme that emerges from it.
Okay, so in response to that, so I still have my vision board from last year, which was a multi-month long journey that I'm not willing to give up yet because I love this vision board. She may be the most beautiful one I've created yet. So I will revisit her when we get off the call.
Great. I don't know, the thing that's coming to mind is like when you are underwater in the middle of your dunk, what are some things that you are saying to yourself? And is there anything there that is fodder for your word of the year?
So when I'm dunking, it looks different whether I'm solo dunking or whether I'm with a group. But there's like a sheer delight and joy of dunking.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm by myself, it feels like a meditative process. It feels very, very meditative and like a demand of being present. Like I feel fully present in those moments.
I was thinking about your dunking as well. You have talked about it on some past podcast episodes, and I don't Instagram very well, but I know that you have also put it there. And every time I have heard you talk about it, I think it brings up a lot for you. And also you are very animated when you talk about it. And it makes me wonder if there's something in what motivated you to dunk or catalyzed the decision to dunk. Like if there's a word there potentially that is allowing you to access all these other feelings.
I love that reflection. So as do most of my habits, when I started dunking daily, it was just kind of like a in the moment decision that simply became a commitment. And I feel super I feel fully embodied dunking. Like it is the total embodiment of my essence and I feel like who I am in the world, right? Like it is that kind of like you get all or nothing. But the word, I will say, like I've been sitting with different words. I've been trying on different words because usually I know like well before the new year. And the closest word that I've landed on is, and maybe this isn't the exact word, but it's either or some variation of claim. Because there's a lot I want to claim in 2024. Like I want to claim motherhood. I want to claim the next expression of our home, our family life, the next expression of what my business looks like in being a mom. And when I think about the dunk, like, there's a lot to claim around dunking while potentially being pregnant. So, and people's opinions about that, like there's almost like a needing to trust my own intuition, trust what feels good in my body, trust what I know to be true, allow myself to be impacted by other people's opinions, but then, follow my own wisdom. And there's also something that feels a little confronting for me about the word claim, because it feels very masculine. And in my first years of business, most of my results were produced with that real kind of hustle mentality, right? Like a real striving energy that is so not how I operate anymore. So, I don't know if maybe there's like an expression of claim that is from a more embodied place.
I love a thesaurus. I think you got to task a thesaurus to help you with this.
That's a great practice. I can totally take that on as another invitation.
This from writing, I have the emotion thesaurus, which is great.
Amazing.
So I'll look through here and send you some pictures if anything, but it has all the physical, it has the definition, the physical signs of it, the internal sensations, mental responses, cues that you're in it, and then cues of it being suppressed, which is awesome because there's just a lot of fodder. I really appreciate the what you're wanting to call in around like the more feminine energetically version of claim. And as you were talking, like 2 words that came to mind were vitality and serenity, which feels like I kind of wonder if you have 2 words this year. If there's like a kind of yin yang sort of play going on for what you're trying to integrate or working with.
That could totally be it. Like I sense that there's a reason why I haven't landed on my word yet. So it may look differently for me than it's looked in the past. It's interesting you say serenity. Serenity is my life purpose. I don't think we've ever distinguished your life purpose, but anyway, there's a tool from the Accomplishment Coaching Toolkit that supports folks in naming, distinguishing their life purpose, which for many of us, we often attribute as a doing, like something that we have to do, some problem in the world that we have to solve for, rather than like it's the full expression of ourselves living on purpose, which for me is serenity. Yeah, that feels very intimidating.
Juicy.
Something that came to mind for me, and please, do with this what you will, because a word is, I think, a very personal thing, and nobody can say what somebody else's word is. But in my mind, when you were describing what the things meant to you, I kept hearing the word hearth. And I thought that was to me, that was the mental image of how you were describing claim. And I also really resonate with what you said about a word feeling like a masculine, maybe aggressive type of energy. A big part of my work is sales. And I often hear people say, eat what you kill, and it is nails on a chalkboard for me. I hate it. I like to say, harvest what you grow.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That reminds me of a book that we read in the Unbounded Mastermind. Rebecca Eller, I wonder if you've ever read it, called Cassandra Speaks.
No.
Oh, you would love it. The author is the founder of the Omega Institute in upstate New York, and she talks all about the power of language and how we need to restructure our language so that it's more aligned with our values and how we want to operate and lead in the world. And so much of the language that we use in business is masculine, based on warfare and aggression and kind of violence, and how we need to bring more of these values of collaboration and femininity and intimacy and relationship and planting. So I completely resonate with that. Well, I'm like so appreciating this conversation, because I feel like so many of our listeners are likely in either camps, right? Like in either of your camp, where they're already landed on their word of the year. They know how they're going to practice it. They know some of the structures that have worked for them in the past, or that they want to try on for size this year. Or you may fall in my camp, where you don't know your word of the year, which is, it's something to surrender to and and trust the divine timing of allowing it to unfold. I love all of kind of the resources that we each shared from our own journeys that have supported us in distinguishing our words of the year. Something I don't think I've ever shared with on the podcast or with either of you before is there's a book that I always revisit at the beginning of every year. I've done it for the past decade. It's one of Louise Hay's first books, called Words. Gosh, I think it's Words and Numbers. Have either of you heard of it? So Louise Hay is the original founder of Hay House, but she's done a lot of research on numerology. So she wrote this whole book that helps you distinguish your number of the year. And then she has, 9 principal numbers, and then 2 kind of, I call them angel numbers. And based on your date of birth and the calendar year, you can distinguish your number. And it changes every year. And I, for the last decade, have done this for my best friend, Emily, for me, and since my husband came in the picture, for him. And Rebecca Eller, it's so funny that you mentioned hearth, because that is totally in alignment with my number of the year based on Louise Hay's numerology. So I will revisit that. And for those of you who haven't landed on your number or your word, I invite you to check out that book, because it's wildly apt.
I'm so impressed that that's what you're reading at the first of every year, because for me, it's always some middle-aged woman who gets magic and inherits like a creaky Victorian house somewhere. That's my first of the year book. I'm still waiting for that. No luck so far, but I think I still have time.
That's awesome. Well, this was delightful. I loved having you both join me. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I look forward to having you both on the podcast again.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode, and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.